Good morning. I'm Chris Jansing. Washington and the political world are buzzing this morning about that bombshell book from former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, who calls the current White House the most centralized and controlling since the Nixon administration. In his new memoir, out next week, Gates takes aim at President Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, and members of Congress. One section talked about a Situation Room meeting on the Afghanistan war, where he says the president expressed personal doubts about his own plans. I thought, the president doesn't trust his commander, can't stand Karzai, doesn't believe in his own strategy, and doesn't consider the war to be his. For him, it's all about getting out. Gates is even tougher on Vice President Biden, writing, I think he has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. Members of Congress aren't exempt from his criticism. He called some senators obtuse and calls members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee rude, nasty, and stupid. I want to bring in our company, National Journal national correspondent Ron Fournier and Politico's senior congressional correspondent Manu Raju. You got to wonder what Gates really thinks. So, Ron, let me start with you. This is a guy who President Obama gave the Medal of Freedom. He worked for George W. Bush before President Obama. What's going to happen with this book? What's going to come out of it?
You know, I wrote a column just now that I actually think, with a full reading of it, I might come away more impressed by the president than Gates through the book, believe it or not.
In what way?
You know, on one hand, obviously, well, it did point out, you know, some of the things we already know about the president, his lack of engagement coupled by an odd micromanagement. And, you know, so there's a lot of head nodding as I was reading through the excerpts, but also it showed a president who was questioning his commanders and second-guessing his strategy and having doubts about his allies, all things that basically you want your president to do at a time of war. It might seem kind of counterintuitive, but that's actually the problem with President Bush in Iraq is he showed no skepticism, he showed no doubt, he didn't push back on his generals, and it's not unusual for a president to be worried about his strategy. Roosevelt did before Normandy, actually had a statement ready in case it failed. Lincoln was hammered by doubts and agonized by doubts all through the Civil War. So I actually think it might show that the president was doing his job as commander-in-chief.
Yeah, and Gates also describes the administration as controlling and determined to take credit for everything. Also that domestic politics factored into every major national security problem and decision, including the president's opposition to the troop surge in 2007. Manu, is this going to rile a lot of people up, or are they just going to say, kind of like what Ron was saying, maybe this is what we want or this is what we already expect goes on in Washington?
Well, I mean, it's riled people up like Joe Biden. I mean, of course, it painted a very harsh light on him and his leadership and his judgment. The president of the White House had to move very quickly to show their support for Biden and show support for his leadership. It's sort of hard for the White House to come out and trash Robert Gates, and I don't think they're doing that because he is a very respected member. Both parties have respected his service over the years. They're going to have to offer their narrative, why the president made his decisions the way he did, why he disagreed with the military commanders. And, you know, the president, as Ron mentioned, you know, coming into office, he said that very clearly that as commander-in-chief, he would sometimes disagree with those military commanders on the ground and provide his own assessment. So in some ways, it's not surprising that these disagreements occurred. What is surprising is a former cabinet member really airing these grievances in such a negative light, and something that's going to force the Obama administration to grapple with in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and somebody who was in the middle of a lot of what Gates writes about was on Today this morning, David Axelrod, and kind of playing down all this stuff in the book. Let me play that for you.
The stories themselves are confusing, Matt, because in it not only did he praise him for the bin Laden raid, but he said he thought he made the right decisions on Afghanistan, that he was a clear, thoughtful, decisive decision maker. So his big complaint is that he thinks that he wasn't sufficiently personally in his heart committed enough to his own strategy. And I don't think that's true.
He does point out, Ron, that Gates did compliment the president, calling the raid on Osama bin Laden one of the most courageous decisions I had ever witnessed in the White House. What's this all about? Is it about selling books? How much is this going to be viewed, do you think, as some real insight into what goes on inside the Obama White House?
Yeah, I might be old-fashioned, but I just have a problem, whether it's a Democrat or Republican in office, I have a problem with his or her advisors coming out of the White House and then trashing the president, especially, this is very rare having a sitting president having to deal with this right now. I think it might reflect more on Gates. You know, he was obviously tortured. He wants to sell books. He wants to get his narrative out there, but he also didn't want to go too hard on the White House. So that's why you do have this. On the one hand, he's a man with high integrity who made a courageous decision on Obama. On the other hand, he really ticked me off and didn't trust me and my generals. One thing I'm surprised about is how defensive Biden has been. I think they've made a political mistake, the Biden shop. They should just let this go away and let us focus on Obama. Instead, we're having this very public photo opportunity with Biden and Obama today at lunch. They put out a statement yesterday defending Biden. He's just raising, his office is just raising those excerpts up to the top of the pile. That's a mistake.
Yeah, because you wonder how much middle America is really going to pay attention to it unless they make something of
They're
it.
going to pay attention if he keeps protesting.
Yeah, let's talk about unemployment now, because it was a surprise yesterday. They started voting while this show was on the air and didn't know if they had the votes, but they got 6 Republican senators to vote with the Democrats to move this forward. But it's not even close to a done deal, of course. The sticking point, Manu, continues to be how to pay for it. Mitch McConnell floating a 1-year delay of Obamacare. John Boehner talking about the Keystone Pipeline. So where's this going, Manu?
It's not clear this is going to pass the Senate. I mean, a couple of those Republicans who did vote to open debate have said that if this is not fully offset or paid for in some way, that they will not vote to end debate, and that's really the critical vote. So whether this gets out of the Senate is an open question. There are a group of Republicans who are trying to propose alternatives to pay for this measure. Senator Kelly Ayotte, one of the 6 who voted yesterday, is coming out with a proposal today dealing with tightening restrictions on child tax credits that could go to undocumented immigrants, and that could be used as a way to pay for it. She says, I'm not convinced that will have the votes to pass the Senate either. So getting out of the Senate will be tough, and getting it out of the House will be even tougher. I think its prospects are in serious doubt.
Yeah, and I thought the headline in The Hill was great. It read, obstructive, Senate GOP says not us. And here's what Senator Dan Coats, one of those 6 GOP senators voting yes, said just in the last hour on the Daily Rundown.
He was hoping that this would fail yesterday, then just blame Republicans for being heartless and cruel. What I wanted to do, and what Senator Ayotte, Senator Portman, and the 6 of us wanted to do, was get to the point where we could go down on the floor, offer our alternatives, and put it before the American people.
Ron, what do you think? How complicated is this debate now?
This is maddening. I mean, these people need help. These benefits need to be extended. It's not the fault of the unemployed that they're caught up in this once-in-a-century historic economic transition. So our leaders on both sides have got to decide whether they want to be adults or partisans. So the White House has got to be willing to compromise, get the benefits, and find a way to pay for them. It can't be no strings attached, as the president says. You don't get everything you want in this world. And the Republicans, you know, they can't put poison pills on it by saying the only way we'll do it, only way we'll find a pay for it is by reducing Obamacare, cutting Obamacare, or the Keystone Pipeline. There's other things in the budget that both sides could find that would be much less harmful than denying benefits to people who just can't find a job. And both sides got to come together and get this done. I'm with Manu, though. My guess is they don't, because this has been a pretty incompetent bunch so far on both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue.
Ron Fournier, Manu Raju, good to see both of you guys. Thanks.